Greetings all, and welcome back to Eye of the Beholder. It's been a while, so here's a quick recap of who I am. I started playing Dungeons & Dragons back in the Red Box day of the 1970s, started DMing right out of the box with Keep on the Borderlands. I DM'd plenty of other TSR dungeons before I tried my hand at writing my own, a truly god-awful dungeon I called Dungeon of the Elements, that I painstakingly wrote out on a Brother typewriter. But, like Bill and Ted, I got better. Shout out to George Carlin. In the beginning, everything was on graph paper, and we would mark out positions on the table using coins, buttons, or dice. We eventually graduated to a few lead figurines for player characters, but they were hard to find and expensive, so we had a very limited collection. Then, in 2003, Wizards of the Coast launched a new miniature game based on Dungeons & Dragons. I bought a couple starter boxes along with a couple Harbinger boxes. We tried out the miniature game, but eventually gravitated back to classic D&D. Needless to say, as a seasoned dungeon master, I immediately saw how amazing these new minis would be on our campaign. So I started collecting. From the inaugural Harbinger set of 2003 through the last set of 2023, Seas and Shores. Enough blathering. As I teased at the end of my last video, we'll be jumping to the end of the alphabet with the next set of videos, and in honor of Halloween, we will be reviewing the Undead. Why start so early, you ask? Simple. A quick count shows there are over 250 unique Undead miniatures released in the 20-year time span we cover. So it's going to take a while. Let's jump in. Allops are created from those souls driven to insanity and suicide. First appearing in the Monster Manual 3.5 in 2003, Allops are incorporeal beings who only desire revenge on the living. As insane dead as they were alive, an Allop attacks by first trying to hypnotize its foe and then drain their sanity. Our only Allop mini comes from 2019's Volos and Mordenkainen's Foes set. WizKids eschews going translucent with this one, opting for a gray-black color palette with bright white eyes. Another example of why switching to a clear base was a great idea. Despite being anchored to the base, we get the impression that this is drifting toward its foes. The body is both wispy and threatening, with a face of pure malice. Score: Paint 17, Pose 21, Playability 16, Pizzazz 23, for a score of 77. The Uncalox is a vicious undead created from the bones of beasts. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my indeed. Driven purely by instinct, they are extremely territorial and predatory. Fun fact, a favorite tactic of the Uncalox is to knock down an opponent and trap them in their rib cage, which they can open and close like a bear trap. We get our only Uncalox in 2023's Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen set. It's, fine. Decent coloring, the pose is appropriately fierce, love the purple tongue lolling out from one side, and the white claws, spikes, and particularly the rib cage are perfectly creature correct. The issue was size, it just needed to be bigger. Remember, this set proudly featured 8 huge miniatures. You would get 2 per super booster when you bought a brick. I guarantee you collectors let out a disappointed sigh if this was one of the minis they got. Score: Paint 18, Pose 17, Playability 17, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 67. Is the Bagman real, or is it a D&D urban legend? The story goes that a bagman was an adventurer who tried to escape certain doom by hiding in a bag of holding and could not find his way out and eventually turned into, well, this. Fun fact, bagmen can appear out of any bag of holding to drag unwilling unfortunates into the bag with them, I assume to create more bagmen. We get our only Bagman mini in 2022's Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. It's pretty much a spot-on match for the artwork, down to the blue-gold bag he is emerging from. Gray of body and black of hair and claw, close examination shows 2 pinpoints of light as its eyes. Pose is appropriately creepy,
on its hands and knees as he slowly emerges from the bag. Score: Paint 15, Pose 22, Playability 13, Pizzazz 14, for a score of 64.
Banshees, also known as groaning spirits, are undead female spirits, usually elven. From the OG Monster Manual, these incorporeal entities hate all life and seek its destruction. While they can drain life from a victim with a mere touch, its most feared weapon is a terrible wail that even high-level PCs are not immune to. Unless you have a high-level cleric in your party, the best defense is to cover your ears and run away.
We get this piece of shit excuse for a Banshee in 2015's Rage of Demons set. Seriously, the post does not fit into the base or the mini, making it useless. And in case you think, well, you just got a defective mini. No, I got 3 of these, and they're all the same. No score. Moving on. Thankfully, we get this Banshee mini in 2020's Fangs and Talons set. Set firmly on the base, but with a pose that still simulates floating in midair. The hair flowing behind, with the right arm reaching out, indicates to me that it is moving towards a party, perhaps to finish it off after a devastating wail. Smoky translucence is it for the color, outside of white specks for the eyes. It's beautiful in its simplicity. Score: Paint 13, Pose 18, Playability 18, Pizzazz 17, for a score of 66.
The Bodak is fairly common in both the Underdark and Shadowfell, and while they are certainly capable of shredding an opponent with their claws, their most deadly weapon is their death gaze. Those who succumb to the gaze may rise as Bodaks themselves. Fun fact, Bodaks project an aura of death around them, injuring any who close to melee with them.
Our first Bodak mini, called a Bodak Skulk, comes from 2009's Monster Manual Savage Encounters set. A monochrome dark blue, but treated with high gloss and white dots for eyes is it for colors. The glossy blue does a wonderful job showing off the muscle detailing of the sculpt, particularly on the back and chest. Pose has the creature with arm upraised in preparation to strike, probably from an ambush. Nice facial detailing as well. Score: Paint 13, Pose 13, Playability 13, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 54. Ten years later, WizKids gives us their version of the Bodak in 2019's Volos and Mordenkainen's Foes set. They go with a totally different look over the WotC version, clothing the Bodak in dark brown shaw, with only its gray arms, legs, and face visible. Pose has it leaning to one side, which I'm pretty sure is intentional, not in need of the hot-cold plunge. Perhaps it's peeking around a corner, about to unleash its gaze on a hapless foe. Score: Paint 14, Pose 13, Playability 15, Pizzazz 13, for a score of, well, how about that? Also 54.
The Bone Claw is a nightmare come to life, or death, or whatever. Truly terrifying entities, they are created when a mage fails an attempt to become a lich. First appearing in 2004's Monster Manual 3, they are usually found in the service of powerful evil mages or clerics. With a reach far exceeding their size, a favorite tactic is to reach out from a concealed position and drag a victim back into the shadows to be torn to pieces.
Our first Bone Claw mini comes in the Death Knell set from 2005. Looks appropriately scary to me. Various shades of gray make up for the body and clothing. Even the skull-like head is more gray than white. Speaking of the skull, note the truly evil look on the face. That's nightmare fuel. Pose with his claws pulled back to the body, head turned slightly right, perhaps taking orders from its master. Score: Paint 18, Pose 15, Playability 15, Pizzazz 16, for a score of 64. 3 years later, WotC gives us a far more threatening Bone Claw in 2008's Against the Giants set. Well named as a Bone Claw Impaler, while it's the same height as the previous mini, it just seems bigger, especially with the left arm raised high in preparation to strike. I really like the way the brown shawl covering the lower body hangs off the arms, nicely contrasting with the gray body. Well done facial features complete the look. Score: Paint 20, Pose 25, Playability 22, Pizzazz 20, for a score of 87. WizKids gives us their only Bone Claw miniature in 2019's Volos and Mordenkainen's Foes set. They go with a much greater color contrast with black clothing covering a bone-white body. Note the skeletal toes pointing out on the base. Another cool detail, note the rens in the arms revealing red muscle underneath, which matches the red of the extremely long claws. The swirling look of the robes, combined with the aggressive positioning of the claws, indicate full battle mode, and like the other two minis, a great facial expression. Score: 100.
In this month's edition of the Frugal Necromancer, on newsstands now, we learn how to turn one corpse into two undead. Meet the Boneless. Created from the skin and entrails of a dead body, they are incredibly flexible and strong, and even capable of wielding weapons. Fun fact, Boneless will sometimes drape themselves over a skeleton or another undead, giving PCs a nasty 2-for-1 surprise.
We get our only boneless mini in 2022's Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Monochrome brown with a dark wash for detailing, the face has a particularly mournful look. Posed as if rising from the ground in preparation for a grapple attack, I could see using this mini as a kind of wandering monster, rising from the dirt to attack the PCs. Score: Paint 13, Pose 11, Playability 14, Pizzazz 12, for a score of 50.
One of the more unusual undead is the Brain in a Jar. Created by a combination of alchemy and necromancy, it possesses terrifying psionic powers as well as the ability to control other undead and even dominate humanoids. And it's not completely stuck in a jar, it can levitate and fly if need be.
We get our first Brain in a Jar in the final WotC set, 2010's Lords of Madness. And to tell the truth, it's a bit underwhelming, particularly for a rare. The smaller size makes it difficult to make out the white brain in the clear plastic jar. Gray three-legged stand and top complete the look. Now, score: Paint 11, Pose 13, Playability 12, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 46. WizKids gives us a much better Brain in the Jar mini in 2022's Fizzband's Treasury of Dragon. Realistically, it's probably too big, but who cares when it looks this good? The brain behind the clear jar actually looks like a brain, cerebrum and all. The stand and top are a nice metallic blue and very detailed, especially the top. Let's use this one. Score: Paint 16, Pose 13, Playability 15, Pizzazz 17, for a score of 61. As if a regular Brain in the Jar isn't weird enough, meet Veneranda from 2021's Snowbound set. Not content to sit in a dungeon and contemplate world domination, this Brain in a Jar wants to see the sights. Sitting atop some type of construct, standing at parade rest with its two-handed sword forward, tip in the ground. With metallic blue armor and orange highlights at its joints, I'm not sure how playable it is, but it is pretty cool. So score is Paint 18, Pose 12, Playability 10, Pizzazz 20, for a score of 62.
Death Knights are mighty undead warriors created from fighters, barbarians, and even fallen paladins who are evil in life. First appearing in the original Fiend Folio in 1981, they are often garbed in opulent robes and the finest armor, but their infernal nature is revealed in their glowing eyes. Terrifying in presence and power, only the most powerful parties can take on one with any chance of survival. Production note, we'll be starting with generic Death Knight miniatures, then move on to the numerous named Death Knight minis.
We get our first Death Knight in 2005's Death Knell set. Ornate armor? Check. Dark red flowing robe? Check. Glowing eyes? Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Seriously, this is a solid effort out of the gate. The armor is highly detailed, with a winged helm and brass highlighting. Pose catches him in the on guard position, knees slightly bent with black-bladed two-handed sword up and ready. Score: Paint 16, Pose 17, Playability 15, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 63. Three years later, we get this Death Knight mini in 2008's Dungeons of Dread. We catch this knight in a more relaxed, but no less ready pose, standing attentively with two-handed sword front and center, point in the ground. Armor is darker here, but still well detailed. Note the skulls at the knees. We also get a full face on this mini, the skull-like visage peering out from the helmet. A long flowing robe and black shield draped across the back complete the look. Score: Paint 17, Pose 15, Playability 15, Pizzazz 18, for a score of 65. Proving that Death Knights were not just human, we get this Death Knight Dragonborn Paladin in 2009's Monster Manual Savage Encounters set. Befitting the species, it is slightly larger than the previous knights, but still has the same dark red robe and richly engraved armor they are known for. The shield is especially well done. No helm, gauntlets, and, interesting, closed-toe boots here. This Death Knight is defiantly moving to battle, fully turned to take advantage of the shield's cover, and sword raised high. Score: Paint 20, Pose 22, Playability 17, Pizzazz 21, for a score of 80. WizKids gives us their first Death Knight in 2016's Monster Menagerie, and obviously did not get the memo from WotC regarding color palette. Gone is the red robe for a white one, albeit with red lining, with a tunic and sash to match. Armor is mostly covered, but what we can see is appropriately ornate enough. But let's talk about the shield. I don't know which order uses an upraised palm as its sigil, but the silver and gold shield looks magnificent. Pose similar to the previous mini, but the flowing robe denotes more movement. Score: Paint 23, Pose 22, Playability 17, Pizzazz 23, for a score of 65. We get this Death Knight mini in 2021's Boneyard set. This guy appears to be partial to axes, with one in hand and a second strapped across his back. Striding ominously into battle, blood-red robe flowing behind, this mini oozes menace. Again, armor is spot on here, with the added gruesome detail of skulls of previous foes strapped to his hip. Honestly, I think I like this one the best. Score: Paint 19, Pose 20, Playability 17, Pizzazz 24, for a score of 80. We get our final generic Death Knight in 2022's Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. First off, this guy is armed to the gills, longsword in his left hand, axe in his right, and a dagger on his belt. Clothing and armor are muted and dark, but you see the really cool detail here? I'll give you a second. There's a gaping wound in the chest that goes clean through the mini. You can see right through it. What a great way to illustrate the undeadness of these horrors. Score: Paint 16, pose 20, playability 15, pizzazz 22, for a score of 73. We now move on to the name Death Knights. Desmere Shadow Dusk was a former paladin of Torn before she, yes she, fell into shadow and became a Death Knight. This mini from 2019's Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage set is fine, but there's really nothing to distinguish it as a Death Knight. The armor is nothing special, no flowing cape, and the only spot of color we get is the red plume at the top of the helm, or maybe a ponytail? Oh yeah, we get an invisible version too. Score: Paint 13, Pose 15, Playability 12, Pizzazz 13, for a score of 53. Haruman is a former paladin of Helm who now serves the archdevil Zariel, so naturally we get his miniature in 2019's Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus set. Right off the bat, props to WizKids for getting Haruman's armor and unique sword correct. Rich brown robes flow beneath upper armor. This Death Knight appears to be at parade rest, sword up but resting on his shoulder, gaze locked straight ahead. I like it. Score: Paint 21, Pose 18, Playability 20, Pizzazz 24, for a score of 83.
Lord Soth. As a reader of the Dragonlance novels, no villain is more terrifying, not even Queen Takhisis. No two-line description here. His backstory is simply too good to spoil. Trust me, go read the books.
WotC gives us their version of Lord Soth in 2004's Giants of Legend set. Impressive for its time, Lord Soth stands tall while brandishing a torch, his sword on his back. Other than the bright orange of the torch flame, the coloring here is extremely muted, black swirling robes over dark gray armor. While perhaps not as impressive as some of the later Death Knight minis, it's still Lord freaking Soth, so score is Paint 18, Pose 17, Playability 15, Pizzazz 25, for a score of 75. We get our second Lord Soth as part of a special release tied naturally to 2023's Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen set. Far taller and more imposing than the WotC version, he stands with sword drawn and pointed forward as if leading an army to battle. The torch burns with the negative energy of death, matching his mount, which we'll get to in the next video. Armor is perfect, and I really like how the purple cloak and matching sash swirl away from the body. Score: Paint 25, Pose 25, Playability 15, Pizzazz 25, for a score of 90. Marahami Ramya Vasavadin is an unusual Death Knight, as she is not exactly evil in life, but rose as a Death Knight to exact vengeance upon her treacherous family. Her miniature, from 2022's Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft set, reflects her heritage in the golden armor she wears. Caught in mid-fight, we get great kinetic movement implied by the ponytail whipping around behind her while she brings shield and sword to bear. This mini could also stand double duty as an NPC knight or paladin, or even as a PC. Score: Paint 22, Pose 19, Playability 23, Pizzazz 20, for a score of 84. Olanthius is another Death Knight in the service of Zariel as commander of the Hell Riders. Also from 2019's Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus set, he looks every bit the infernal general, standing before his troops, flaming sword in hand. Notice the breastplate? Yeah, it's a skull with translucent red eye sockets. And while the face and hair give off Hulk Hogan vibes, it's still a pretty cool looking miniature, so score is paint 23, pose 15, playability 15, pizzazz 24, for a score of 77. Our final Death Knight miniature is Zolthar's Shadow Dusk, brother of Desmir, who followed her into the darkness. His mini, also from 2019's Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage set, has the same fault as his sisters, as there is nothing to distinguish it from a human knight, paladin, or even city guard. He even has the same red plume at the top of the helm, so not a ponytail. So he gets the same score as his sister, paint 13, pose 15, playability 12, pizzazz 13, for a score of 53.
Deathlocks are undead spellcasters raised from the remains of warlocks. They are usually subservient to their masters. Their spell use can be customized to match those that they knew in life, along with whatever spells their masters decide they should have. These make for excellent distractions at worst, and actual threats at best, at the side of the big bad of your next campaign.
We get our first Deathlock in 2005's Death Knell set. Posed mid-spell, right hand pointing directly forward as he casts, body turned sideways, and gaze fixed on his target. Other than the white runes running down the tunic between his legs, there's little in the way of detailing or paint to set this miniature apart. It is a common though, so if you want a squad of them, it's doable. Score: paint 10, pose 13, playability 15, pizzazz 12, for a score of 50. "16 years later, WizKids takes a run at the creature in their Boneyard set, and frankly, does a whole lot better. Also caught in mid-spell, we actually see the beginning of what could be a mage hand or one of the various Big B's spells emanating from the raised left hand while he clutches a staff in the right. Nice touch using translucent blue for the spell effect. The rest of the color palette is solid as well. There's a version of Deathlocks known as Masterminds. I could see using this one as the leader of the aforementioned WotC common versions. Score: paint 15, pose 18, playability 18, pizzazz 17, for a score of 68.
The Dire Guard is basically a souped-up skeleton, with the ability to think and take actions on its own, with a bit of spellcasting ability for good measure. Their favorite battle attack is to lead with a magic missile spell before closing in for combat.
We get our only Dire Guard mini in 2005's Angel Fire set, which is a strong set. However, this specific mini isn't. You can barely make out the skeletal details in the monochrome black of the body, with the silver of the sword the only break in the monotony. It looks to me as if using its favorite strategy, casting a spell before charging into battle. I would use these as leaders of groups of lesser undead, which bumps the playability up a notch. Score: paint 9, pose 12, playability 16, pizzazz 10, for a score of 47.
And that's a wrap on our first Undead video. We'll be picking things back up in the D's, that sounds kind of naughty, with a bang as we lead off with the Death Dragons. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch my channel. Please leave a comment if you like. I have the Beholder, signing off.